What a week by the Buccos to be 3 games up. They're 50 wins for the first time since 2015. Most runs in baseball right now. Like we've said about the Pirates, they're a roller coaster team, and right now we are at the top of the hill. Episode 26 of Out of Town Yinzers. I'm Joe alongside Justin. We're Pittsburghers from out of town, but still talking Pittsburgh sports. And today we got to lead with those Buccos, those Pirates. I feel like we were talking last week, flip-flopping. Should we be excited about the Pirates? Should we not be? We actually took a more positive route on the episode last week, and it has paid off. They went 4-2 since we last recorded, including a sweep of the Brewers with a mercy roll game today with what was it, an 11-run inning or a 10-run inning in the fourth. So what a week by the Buccos to be 3 games going up on 500. They're 50 wins for the first time since 2016, I think, or 2015. First time over 500 since 2016. Most runs in baseball right now scored out of anybody. Pirates, most runs in baseball. So like we've said about the Pirates, they're a roller coaster team, and right now we are at the top of the hill. What are you feeling about the Pirates right now? Is it playoffs or bust? How are you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, last week we were, like you said, we were trying to be positive, trying to, forcing ourselves to be positive with some of the stats, and, the record wasn't reflecting it. But it feels like this is more, these last 2 series are more. Even that Braves series, they easily could have won that series, probably should have won that series. But you talk about a crazy week. We were thinking, we won't have much to talk about with the, going into the All-Star game and other teams, not in season, and that's definitely not the case. Crazy week. You had the O'Hearn game, which feels like weeks ago at this point because of everything that happened in the Brewers series, and you have Valdez having the day he had, Saturday. So just a crazy week for the Pirates. It is amazing too, like how they went 4-2. They didn't even win the Braves series, but just the not even a week out from when we last recorded, how 2 series can just completely change your opinion and change the momentum and everything like that for the season. It feels like it was perfect timing going into the All-Star break. They needed it. Like those 3 wins against the Brewers count any more than others, but it feels like more than 3 wins. That series really changes. The whole feel of the first half feels different, pre-All-Star break because of that series.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's so many things about the Pirates season that kind of made you be excited and be on the positive side, and then there were just some really bad things that brought you right back down. And this past week was a week in which the bullpen really didn't implode. I feel like the bullpen's worst showing was probably on the back half of that Jared Jones perfect game, 6 innings, which also feels like a long time ago now, but great to see from Jared Jones as well, who only continue to kind of be built up as the season progresses. So again, I feel like what I was saying was going into the last week is they had to be at least 500 to be a game up over 500 going into the break. To be 4-2 against the Braves and the Brewers is so positive, and to start winning some series at home, including the sweep. There's just so much to be excited about, be positive about when you come out. Again, when they're going to be coming out of the break, it's still going to be some tough teams they're staring at. They're going to be playing the Guardians, they're going to be playing the Yankees, they're going to be playing the Cubs. So there's going to be some important games leading up to the trade deadline on August 3rd. I feel like that's the next line in the sand. I feel like the last one we were kind of talking about was the All-Star break. So now it's kind of that next mini season, which is now until the trade deadline, to see where the Pirates stand. And really, again, if they can kind of pull some momentum. We've been saying this whole season that they have the team, they have the bats, they have the starting rotation to be able to pull up some win streaks and really go on a little bit of a roll. And it's kind of a shame maybe they're taking 4 days off, but otherwise, this is a team that if they could get on a little bit of a roll now and really just win a few more of these series, man, at the same time when maybe the Marlins and the Cardinals start taking a few steps back as the season attrites for them. So again, I feel like it's a really positive spot for the Pirates in a place they haven't been in a decade.
Yeah, and like you just said, the Marlins and the Cardinals are 2 teams that they're chasing. There's a lot of teams that are right behind them in the standings, but that's the big thing for me is do you fear the Marlins or the Cardinals? They haven't played the best against the Cardinals this year, but those are 2 very, I don't fear those teams to the point where I'm like, oh man, I don't know, we're going to be able to catch, it's not like we're talking the Phillies are right ahead of them and the reason they're not going to get in, or one of these teams a little bit more dominant. I think it's right there for them. At this point, there's absolutely no reason, we're not talking trade deadline yet, but there's no reason that they have very obvious flaws. And there's no reason they don't address them and really go for it. Because at this point, I really do think in the second half here, the expectation should be the playoffs. I don't know why it wouldn't be, with the roster they have. And, I mean, that doesn't even take into account they've had injuries, too. They're hitting like this, and they've got injuries. I mean, I can't wait to see this lineup with Horwitz and Cruz back, let alone how they've been playing the last week, especially when, you added Valdez. All of a sudden, you look completely different with his bat from the right side. So I'm excited. I don't know how you couldn't be excited about this lineup, from here on out the rest of the way. 42% chance of the playoffs, according to Fangraphs. I think that changed a lot in the last week, too. I think they went up a good 5% or more even in the last, week since we last recorded. So I think it's probably about right, but I think it, could very easily be 50% or greater if they can address, a few things. Probably more than that if they can just address the bullpen.
Yeah, I still think it all comes down to the bullpen. I feel like Mitch Keller is going to be your other black mark in the rotation. He's been really bad probably the last 6 starts or so. He's also your 5th starter, so I feel like the bar should be a little bit lower there. The use, there's a few things just I want to kind of run through with the team. So I feel like from a bullpen standpoint, I do feel like there's a few arms that it might be finding their place in the bullpen. So I feel like Matson coming back was a positive addition.
Yep.
I feel like Montgomery has been solid throughout most of the year, Soto. So I think you got 3 arms that are there, and then Majinski being the 4th. I think that's very solid. I just still struggle with the use of Majinski.
Yeah, we were just talking about that.
Yeah, the quote that Charrington said over the weekend, I feel like, about Majinski, too, that, he's going to be pitching, a little bit more in bulk, and then we give, Kelly a few days in which Majinski's available and then come back. Like, that's not how you run a bullpen. You're just going to get in trouble that way, especially when that's your best arm in the bullpen. So hopefully that kind of trickles through. The one fun wild card, and maybe we can kind of transition into some MLB drafts things from here, is that Seth Hernandez was in the Futures game also today. He pitched a scoreless inning, got up to 101. I think his changeup, though, was his best pitch today. So he's throwing a 101, and it's not even his best stuff type pitch that he has. So that kind of tells you about Seth Hernandez. He had an interesting quote after the game saying that this was the first time he's come out of the bullpen, and he doesn't remember how long. But maybe that shows the Pirates that he can be able to do it. So wouldn't that be fun if the Pirates were really cooking and needed an extra arm, that they had a Seth Hernandez come up for the last few weeks to be eligible for the playoffs as well. So you never know. Pull out all the stops. Could be a strike next year. And, the Pirates aren't in this type of spot too many times where they have the offense that they do, if you can kind of just bolster that rotation and bullpen. And then lastly, from a bullpen standpoint, with the trade deadline coming up, I think now it's finally the time to flip over, talk trade deadline. They obviously traded their 34th pick for essentially Jacob Gonzalez, who's going to be your fill-in maybe, I guess, for Griffin. But I feel like they can't quit Triolo. He still started today and both sides of the doubleheader yesterday. But again, Jacob Gonzalez is a high pedigree guy. I don't love the trade from what I think you could have gotten back for that 34th pick. I feel like Jacob Gonzalez was a little bit underwhelming. I particularly didn't love it, and maybe I'm extrapolating here, but I did feel like a cheap move for the Pirates as well, as a way to get out of paying the $3 million that would have came, or almost $3 million with that 34th pick, to pay a Jacob Gonzalez now, who did get a big bonus. Back when he was there, was a 3-figure, $3 million plus bonus, but the Pirates weren't the one that paid it, and now he's just a major league minimum guy for a few years now as well. I think the lefty they got back is a guy at best, but otherwise a throw-in. Hopefully it's not someone that they can't just move on from if he doesn't work out. But he has had 2 scoreless innings, but they didn't look too great. So that's kind of my overall thoughts on where the state of the team is a little bit from a pitching staff, and then kind of wrapping in that trade. What's your thoughts on that trade? Is there anything that stuck out for you?
Yeah, and the returns most of the responses are pretty in line with that I had read, are pretty in line with what you had said. I have a family member who's actually a White Sox fan, and he was kind of like, I'm surprised that the White Sox got that. Same deal. He mentioned with the reliever, his analytics are probably better. Like, it's not something you really want to have to depend on. So maybe his analytics are a little bit better. Probably don't project great long run or moving forward. It just felt to me, and the bigger thing here, and it's just the worst that they can't make a move without you being like, is this financially motivated? Like, all the moves, we'll talk about another one here in a second, but like, I
Joey
just
Bart's
hate that
was.
you can't. Yeah, Yeah, and that indirectly lost them a game, ironically. But I just hate that you can't trust it when they make a move. Not that every move is like this. I mean, they certainly have made some good moves, but moves like this, you're like, was this just solely finance? Like, was this all? Did they want to move the pick, like you had mentioned, just because they didn't want to pay for the pick? And I hate that we have to do that. Like, I understand it. Like, it's not like there aren't other teams making moves like this, but it's just like, this shouldn't be a year you're making moves like that, and that shouldn't be your reason. I don't have any problem at all with moving the pick. I thought it made a lot of sense to maybe package that with someone else and fix a problem. That's my biggest issue with the move in general. Just on paper, not even bringing finances into play, is it felt like they tried to band-aid multiple issues as opposed to just fixing an issue. Just use the 34th pick. If you have to package something else with it, whatever, solve an issue. Like, know for sure, okay, this is one issue that is solved. I'm not saying it's not going to take multiple moves to fix the bullpen, but at least you would know, okay, we know we have at least one of these guys. I don't know that they really. Do you feel confident they solved any one issue based on this move?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give the glass half full side to the trade as well. So I do think, like you said, the 34th pick was a trade chip, especially with their minor league system after their last top two and a few guys you probably don't want to move, kind of what's available to them. Makes sense. You essentially would kind of hope that 34th pick would turn into a Jacob Gonzalez in 2 to 3 years.
Yep.
Someone who's hitting, 18, 19 home runs with 1,000 OPS, who has the first round pedigree, both, as that high schooler coming out. So he's someone that maybe could be putting it together and is someone that could be a longer term piece. The Pirates certainly didn't have kind of the upper minors, middle infield depth in their system. They have some depth in the upper minors. It's not in the middle of the infield. They've kind of run out of guys in that place. Termar Johnson, for example, would be one of those guys, but he's not coming over and playing shortstop. Yeah. So I think Jacob Gonzalez is someone that's going to be able to play some innings at short, and he's someone that is on a longer upward trajectory too. That you're kind of taking a roll of dice on, which is essentially what the 34th pick would be as well. I just know when it comes to the draft and the draft pool, and maybe we can kind of transition to that, is that the more money you have, the more flexibility you have. And we talk a lot about financial flexibility for the Pirates, but this is a place where it actually matters. And that when you have they had the biggest pool of money going into the draft, this trade knocked them down from $19 million to spend to $16 million to spend. So still plenty. And I think they are going to save a little bit with the first rounder that they did take. But I'll flip it over to you to kind of maybe do a quick recap of who they took in the draft, and then I'll give a few takes from my side on the guys.
Yes, they took Curiel from LSU. Again, certainly, if you listened last week, not one of the guys you were certainly hoping that they took. That someone we didn't really even talk about. But it did sound like we were talking right before the draft, and it did sound like it was going to be a college bat. Again, same. But my comment is same thing as we just talked about. Like, I just hate that. Maybe it was because all this happened in the same day, so it just highlighted it more. But like, same deal. Like, did they make this pick? I was watching a stream of the draft or listening to a stream, and that's what they said. And these are national guys right away. I wonder if finances played into this. And it's just unfortunate that as fans, like, you just don't know. Like, you, with the Pirates, it's the first thing that you think of with some of these picks. So it just seems like maybe he doesn't have as high upside. I don't mind taking a college back because I think in terms of their window, not that you ever should be making top 5 picks because of your window, but I don't hate that aspect of it. What did you think just in general? What was your initial – we didn't talk too much about this. What was your initial take? What do you think about the player?
Yeah, so I don't think finances matter as much here, and it's certainly not a negative either. I think the Pirates are going to spend their pool. They've proven they'll spend their pool, so they're cheap, but they do spend the Major League draft pool that comes around. They're the team that actually broke it, that had a great draft pool back when they picked Garrett Cole and Josh Bell back in the same draft. But when it comes to Derek Curiel, to begin with, like I mentioned, I kind of had a top 4 for me when it came to the players. So it was the clear top 3 that was there, and then Jackson Flora would be the clear next of that tier, who was the pitcher. He went the pick right before them. So it did kind of come to a spot where there wasn't really that same clear choice. So maybe it was a Derek Curiel, maybe it was Drew Burris, who's a smaller outfielder, who's a college bat as well. Maybe it was an Eric Booth Jr., who's a clear center fielder with in terms of athleticism, but who knows if high schoolers can hit enough as they can. Derek Curiel is someone that's interesting because he had both a high school pedigree in a sense that he was a top 20 high schooler that came out in the same draft as Connor Griffin. Connor Griffin knows Derek Curiel. They played on the same USA baseball team, so they're close that way. But Curiel is someone that went back to school, so he turned down that $2 million-ish bonus to go back to school to get the bonus that'll probably be in the $6 million range now. So it made sense for him over those last 2 years, and he's absolutely raked at LSU. So he's someone that bat the ball is great. And one thing that was really fun to see when kind of looking deeper at Derek Curiel, particularly since they already drafted him, was some of his highlights around him as a defensive center fielder. I think he's someone who can absolutely hold down center field, and that changes the kind of the prototype of what you need out of the bat as well. So I think the weakness in Derek Curiel's game is probably his power, but if he can play a really solid center field, have strong bat to ball, and kind of high average, that's probably the type of player you hope on that he's going to be. And then if he's more than that, that power develops. And if he's less than that, that hit tool is not what it came out and was advertised as it is. And it becomes more of a Termarr Johnson in, AAA, where the hit tool was, proclaimed a much better, and then, kind of over time kind of got beaten down. So I think that's the two sides of Derek Curiel. But I think the glass half full is he's someone that should be able to move quickly. He's a college bat. He played well in the SEC for 2 years. He's a draft-eligible sophomore, so he's still on the younger side. But he's someone who could come up and be your center fielder in Pittsburgh in maybe, 2.5 summers, I'd say. So, I think that's on the fast side of some of these players as well. So I do think the downside of a Derek Curiel, and something you kind of see throughout some of the early other picks, like an Anthony Ruiz or Chris Rembert, who are the next two, was the lack of power. So I think that's kind of the side where you kind of choose one side of the coin or another from a prospect standpoint. Do they have great contact, or are they hitting for great power? And then if you can do both, they're pretty rare prospects, so they go really high. But usually it's one side or the other. Curiel's definitely more of a bat to ball. So we'll see how it plays out. I don't think he was a huge overdraft. I think he would have probably went top 10 or 11, 12, 13 otherwise. So he's right or not too much farther than where he was going to be. But again, it was just kind of the way the draft fell. It would have been nice if Flora was there, or if like a Lackey somehow fell to them at 5. But otherwise, there was no other slam dunk there. So that's kind of my thoughts on Curiel.
Yeah, I'm listening to, I think it was Charrington and their head scout. They talked a little bit about him after the draft. I do think the connection played in there. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but he's trained with, he has the LSU connection with Skeens and has trained with him once or twice. Knows Griffin, like you said, being the same year as him. It seemed like, I think Griffin had even texted him before the draft, even started. So it does seem like a connection. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it does seem like that played in at least a little bit to some extent. Whether that really mattered a ton or not, maybe they were just more comfortable with him because they, had some direct connections to him. But thought that was interesting. Also an abnormal draft in general. Very few pitchers. I think only one pitcher taken in the first, 14 or 15 picks, which is very abnormal for an MLB draft. So it certainly didn't seem like it had the high-end pitching that maybe most drafts do. Yeah. Even Flora, I think the knock on him was, he has the fastball, which puts him right there, like you said, the ceiling. But, the second pitch, he doesn't really have a great second, like an out pitch other than the fastball. So they're it's baseball. They're projecting on all of these guys, but hopefully he ends up being a good pick for him. I don't think he's going to have they can only go, the run they've had is just ridiculous with Hernandez, Griffin, and Skeen. So I heard an analyst this week saying the biggest issue that whoever they pick is going to have is that he's just not one of those three, which is fair. That's a fair take.
Yeah, for sure. And then I think you got your high upside high school guy in Aiden Ruiz and your second round pick. And again, if you see some of the video from him, they definitely say he's a no doubt, shortstop. And if you see some of the glove work and how the hands work, I feel like there's a big difference between some of those guys on what they can do. He's someone that looked pretty slick. So I believe that he could stick to. And Rembert is someone who hit. I feel like, drafting people from the SEC is kind of the way to go. If you're going college bats, if they can handle the SEC, they can probably at least handle AA, and then we'll see what happens from there. So I think Rembert is someone who's going to be a bat first second baseman. And, Jason DeCaro is someone that I remember watching some of the College World Series and, North Carolina versus West Virginia, some of those games. DeCaro looked pretty good. I don't think he has the high-end stuff, so I think his stuff would have to take a step. But, I think a lot of good stuff. I love the draft. We'll see what happens from here. But, again, I think the rest of their draft kind of rounded out maybe what we kind of were expecting from Curiel. So when you say, hey, we went a little underslot for Curiel, maybe that's allows you to get a Ruiz, in the second out of high school and not have him go back. And, and Andrew Giles, another high schooler in the fourth round. So that kind of gives you a little bit extra cash there to bring a few more prospects into play. Cool. So I think that's a good spot to stop on baseball. And let's flip over to football now, and the Steelers. We're inching towards training camp. Today we just want to talk about kind of what we think are the two biggest training camp battles on the offensive side for people who are going to see the field this year. So we'll leave the backup quarterback training camp battle to a different topic. We'll maybe wait till the first preseason game before we really jump into that one. But I think the first one, we talked a lot about the offensive line being a lot better this year for Pittsburgh. One thing that's most interesting is the right side of the offensive line flipped over to the left side this year. So Faltano's on the left side, McCormick's on the left side, which is both their natural positions. But that opens up right guard, which we're going to talk about today, which I think is between a full battle, I would say, between Spencer Anderson, Dunker, who's the rookie, and then I think you'd have to throw in Hoffman, who would be the free agent signing to get legitimate look as the first right guard as well. But Justin, what are you thinking about kind of that right side of the offensive line, particularly the guard position, and how you feel like that might shake out in training camp?
Yeah, I think you're right to mention Hoffman, too. I think he's flying a little bit under the radar. People just forget about him. Not exactly a glamour signing whenever you sign a guard. But yeah,
well, McCarthy knows him,
matter.
So I think that makes...
Yep. So definitely, that was a good call out. I feel like maybe, and if you listen, we're high on Dunker. I think they're going to take it slow with him from everything that I've read so far, and some of the buzz coming out of their mini camp and everything, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing at all. But it does feel like it's going to be Spencer Anderson would be my guess. But I'm sure Hoffman will get some play there as well. I would be very surprised if it was Dunker. Wouldn't be shocked if it was Hoffman. And I'm sure they'll both Anderson and Hoffman will play, and even Dunker will play at some point. But I don't think maybe we were a little excited about that. And I'm still excited about the Dunker. But it's not like our minds changed or nothing's really changed. Nothing's really happened, to be fair, to this point. But it does seem like they're going to, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, they're going to go Anderson. That would be my guess. I think that's a good call out too. Hoffman could see more playing time than maybe he kind of flying under the radar. So,
yeah, I would say the same thing. I think it's Spencer Anderson's job to lose, and I think really when you look across the whole Steelers roster, we're trying to create these battles, but I feel like most of the starting lineup is already known. Right now, and across the board, and probably the backup is known too, and it kind of is in this sense. But I do think, and why I call it out, I do think right guard is one of those that. Spencer Anderson is probably a better swing backup than he is a true starting guard as well. Right. So if someone could take the place of a Spencer Anderson, I think you're a stronger team if he's kind of that swing backup as well. So that's one that would be extremely exciting if you saw someone like Dunker really come out and perform strongly. And he's someone who has the pedigree too. We got him in the late third, but I think that was kind of dropped to the late third. I do love a tackle coming in the guard who's plenty big enough to be a guard in the NFL. So, like you said, I feel like when it comes to training camp, that's going to be a fun one to watch, particularly that redheaded mullet maniac out there that I think will win a lot of hearts. So we'll see kind of how that plays out. I do think it's really hard to kind of judge offensive line. So, Justin, before we move on, what would you need to see, or is there anything that you would be able to see from a Dunker other than multiple pancakes that would get you excited?
Yeah, it's kind of hard, especially because a lot with the linemen, a lot of it's going to be, what they're seeing with and this isn't unique to linemen, but it's hard. You could see a lot from maybe a skill position or a quarterback, for example, in preseason games, whereas a guard, it's a little harder to they're going to be going off of. What they're seeing in practice more so. Not that that's irrelevant for all positions, but I do think with linemen, it's probably more what you read. We'll probably learn more from what we're reading, what we're hearing out of camp, as opposed to maybe solely from preseason games or whatever the case might be.
Yeah, no, 100%. I just feel like it is going to be, like we said, kind of probably Spencer Anderson going in, and then we'll kind of see what happens from there. But I think the position that's more fun to scout and watch as a fan is the wide receiver position. Wide receiver 3 is definitely up for grabs right now, and probably the front runner is the rookie. In this case, with Jeremy Bernard, probably the person we would hope would take that step. But Justin, I don't know if you had any thoughts or original perspective on kind of the wide receiver 3, and particularly your boy Jeremy kind of in that spot.
Yeah, and we talked about it a little bit last week, but yeah, we didn't really make a prediction, I guess, per se. I do think he's going to win the wide receiver 3 spot. I do think that there's I think there's a chance that maybe they take it slow on him, but everything that you're hearing from camp, everything, and in reality, it's him or Roman Wilson. I do think Roman Wilson's, he's going to make the team. I think he'll get some play, and I'm excited to see him in an actual offensive leaning, staff with an offensive staff. But everything that you've been hearing, it's hard for me because I was so high on him before we even knew he was going to be a Steeler. It's hard for me not to think he's gonna take that role. I'm very excited about him. I've been excited about him since they made the pick. But I do think the way his game also plays to playing early. Like it lends itself to playing early. And he's got some flexibility in terms of playing in the slot or even playing outside at the Z position off the ball. So I think he'll be the wide receiver 3. I would be pretty surprised. I'll say I would be surprised if he doesn't win the wide receiver 3 spot.
Yeah. And to be honest, the only thing I would correct there is I don't think it's in the running with Roman Wilson as wide receiver 3. I think it's between Jeremy Bernard and Skowronek to be wide receiver 3 coming out of the gate. I don't think we sleep on Skowronek being that guy when it comes to Aaron Rodgers, who's still the quarterback under center.
That's
true. Whether that means they just have, more, 2 tight end, 2 wide receiver sets. Kind of how that looks, but I do think, like you said, Jeremy Bernard's someone that just his game is not a wow game. He's someone that can come in and run routes and be in the right spot at the right time, and that's how you stay on the field and get the ball from an Aaron Rodgers type quarterback who will demand that. So it's just there's not too many scenarios in which a rookie starts week 1 with Aaron Rodgers as a quarterback as well. So I think, to me, the most likely person suiting up week 1 would be Ben Skowronek, which would make an even taller kind of starting wide receiver group there. But Jeremy Bernard is certainly the person you want there as a Steeler fan. And then Roman Wilson's a complete wild card. And I think, I don't think anybody else that they drafted, which would be, Eli, kind of in the 7th round, I don't think he's going to be in that spot. And Wetchen, I don't think he's going to be in that spot either. So I feel like it truly is kind of those guys. And I don't think it's Bernard's spot to lose. I don't think he's fully penciled in there, but I think it won't take that much for him to get to that spot just on talent alone, based on everybody else who's in that room against him.
Yeah, you do make a good point. Like, the Aaron Rodgers thing is real. He does not trust. If he doesn't trust them, they're not going to be on the field. Now, and just look at the stats. We talked about this a few months ago, but look at Devontae Adams' first year. He did not have a good rookie season. Now, some of that may have been injury. I don't remember the specifics then, but go back and look at his stats. He did not play a ton. He did not have great stats whatsoever in his first year. And some of that is Aaron Rodgers. He'll work with someone that maybe isn't quite as talented. If he can trust them, they're going to be in the right spot. So it's possible. I don't think anyone really expects, a few weeks into the season where Bernard isn't the wide receiver 3. The question is really just, does he start week 1? And again, you could be right. It's unfortunate that would be the other option, but it is possible week 1 that Bernard. You may have even swayed me a little bit, and maybe week 1 he doesn't start. I still think he does. I just think the talent's going to win out. I hope. Maybe this is me just being hopeful, but Aaron Rodgers is different when it comes to receivers for sure.
Yeah. No, 100%. I'm with you too. I would definitely rather see Bernard there, but I'm trying to be realistic that it could be Skowronek, just because how that worked out. But anyways, we're getting closer and closer to Steelers training camps. We'll try to talk through a few more topics as we get in before there's some real football for us to talk about as we get going. But let's flip lines to the Penguins. Again, we talked last week kind of about the Penguins and how they have went through free agency. They went through the NHL draft now, so a good chunk of kind of what the NHL offseason is. There are obviously still free agents out there to be signed, but the big flurry has already happened. So now's the time where you can kind of see some dust has settled. What does this mean to the Penguins lineup overall? So let me just run through kind of the top few lines here. You got Raquel, Crosby, Rust as your top line, Chanakov, Novak, Malkin as line 2, Kuzemko, Kindle, and Robertson, line 3, so some new names there, and Dewar, Lizotte, and LaPierre, who you liked in kind of that fourth line. And then on defense, you have Van Riemsdyk and Carlson, Gerard and Letang. That worked out real well last year. Let's just run it back. Carlisle and Korzak as your last pairing. And then, you have Silovs coming back, and then Murshov kind of being your other goalie tandem there. But what are your initial thoughts on kind of the overall Penguins lineup? Is it better, worse, about the same? And what are the expectations with this type of a lineup to run out there?
So I think it is about the same. I don't think they're better than they were last year, which, you don't necessarily expect it. The problem with that, though, is they did have the most cap space going into free agency. We went over, last couple of weeks how maybe the free agency class wasn't what we were hoping or what we thought. So it's not like this is shocking or shouldn't have been shocking like we talked about last week. Problem for me is they're in that kind of middle range right now, kind of almost in purgatory, like we've talked about with the Steelers in a way. They're in a little bit more of a unique situation since they have that older core. So it's kind of like, which way do you go? You could argue that Dubas is kind of playing both sides, which isn't the worst thing. Like, he doesn't want to give up on the Crosby, with Crosby still there, but he is trying to get younger at the same time, which I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. It's just like when you take a step back and look at the whole puzzle now, it's kind of like some of these moves. We talked about this last week, but they have 4 right shot D-men now. So it's kind of like something else should happen there. I guess you could argue it's not like it has to be perfect, when you start the season, because, in hockey there's going to be moves. There's always moves. But they're also not we used to feel that way back when they were a lock for the playoffs. They can't just go into the season going, we'll figure it out. We're going to make moves, and this isn't how the roster's going to be at the end of the season. Points matter for them. When you're in that middle of the road type, maybe tier that they're in, by no means are the playoffs guaranteed for them at this point. So I just don't know that you want to be banking on. We talked about it at length when at the end of the season last year. I don't know that you want to be banking on being top 5 in goals and not just carrying your team. It's just not a great recipe for success. I'm very surprised. Not only did they not improve defensively, I thought there was maybe a move that was going to be made, and we've talked about why in the last couple of weeks. But not only did you not add on defense, or there's no pairing that I feel comfortable right now with for Carlson. Van Riemsdyk is a nice player. He's certainly not a top player. He's also a right-handed shot, so he's going to be playing a little bit out of position if you put him with Carlson. He to me, he feels like a really nice number 4 or 5 defenseman, and it seems like they have a lot of that. That's my main takeaway from the offseason. It feels like they added a lot of things that they already have, whether you look at on defense or offense. It feels like they added a lot of the same player. We've talked before. I love the fact that now all of a sudden they finally have depth. They found depth last year for the first time in who knows how long, which was kind of their weakness, last handful of years. But it's almost like they're kind of blocking. I understand, it's hockey. These guys are going to get hurt, and you don't have to be worried about McGrady or Hayes. They're going to find ways, through injuries to get them up. But it's almost like they signed guys that just blocked them and didn't address defense, which is kind of big picture. It's kind of puzzling a little bit. Their defense is kind of a mess. Like you said, Gerard. And I don't know, a full season of watching that pairing again. I guess there were some news that Gerard was playing through injury. He did look better, in the playoffs. I think that type of game kind of lent itself to them looking better. But man, I don't know that you want to go through. I can't imagine feeling good going into the season if this is their defense.
Yeah, I would say the same. And a lot of the kind of what you said too is, what we're talking about is, hey, we want the Penguins to get younger and add more talent, particularly high-end talent. And I feel like as the team is right now, that did not happen whatsoever. You have 4 of your top 6 that are 34 going on 35-year-olds or more. You added Kuzmenko as your big offseason signing for $5 million a year. And, if you're going to tell me he's really that much better than McGrody or Hayes, that's probably a tough sell versus, a clear person you'd be adding to the lineup. And then, like you said, it's just very, very light on the left side of that defense. overall. I am really excited about the goalies, though. So Miroshov, Silovs, I feel like both of those guys, 25 and younger, I think that's your youth. I think you just need some of these kind of bottom six offensive players to kind of take some steps. Kindle, being able to move up to be a second-line center instead of a third-line center would be huge. Novak as a second-line center is someone that you're not going to be excited about as well. See winning the Stanley Cup, but it's also not one that you're going to see have the fewest wins in the NHL either. So they're kind of in the NHL purgatory, it looks like, yet again. But maybe a few more guys knocking on the door this year than last year when you talk about McGrody, Hayes, but then also you got some of those guys in the AHL that are coming with a Horkoff and Zonin as well. So we'll see.
I don't hate like none of the moves they made. I'm like, oh, why did they make this move? It's just more bigger picture. It's like I just don't. I guess to be fair to them, the offseason is by no means over. We have, they have plenty of time to make other moves, and I just can't imagine this is the defense they want to go into the season with. It's just like you look at it, it's like the two defensemen you felt comfortable with, obviously Carlson, but like actual stay-at-home D-men they moved or are no longer on the roster. Probably not what you want to be doing when defense is your weakness. So just like that Wotherspoon move, like I get it, I understand it, kind of. Yeah, you could spin it, makes sense. But then you look at it, it's like, well, what? Like, they needed to be adding top four D-men, not losing them. You got a lot of, like, fourth, fifth, D-men, like, swing between a second pairing or a third pairing type guys. It's just not a great recipe for success. So we'll see what they do. But there's, as of right now, there's definitely, I think it's very fair to be very skeptical about the offseason. But we're not, like, it's not over either. So it'll we'll know more when we see what like the full picture is. It just is a little bit puzzling right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think we're going to be entering a little bit of a dead space of the NHL calendar season too, so maybe we'll have some time to dive into some of this a little bit deeper, but otherwise, things kind of are status quo until we see a little bit of change here, which is, the NHL season's not that far away either when you think of how long the offseason is for the NHL or the NFL in comparison. So let's wrap up today with some Pitt talk. Again, kind of a little bit of a lull before Pitt football really kicks off, but did have a Pitt football legend on Pardon My Take, PMT, a fellow podcast, very similar to ours, similar audience size, things of that nature.
Yeah.
But,
one of our competitors, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, we were busy. Otherwise, Larry was going to come on here.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I was really excited to hear him on there, particularly talk about the Pitt segment, which he went hard on the West Virginia fans. So So go ahead.
Very out of character for him. I mean, if you listen to it, like I obviously thought it was great. I thought it was hilarious, some of the things he was saying. But like, man, I would have not. If you would have told me, you'd have read me like the actual comments that were made about maybe some things about oral hygiene and the water down there, and them IQ, things like that. I would if you probably could have put 10 different Pitt players up. He might have been 10th out of the guys I would have guessed made the comments that he made. So this is a great time, I guess, to bring up the fact we're going to be talking about some of these rivalries coming up. And without giving too much away, I think the Pitt-West Virginia rivalry is one of the most underrated rivalries in all of college football. I've actually heard that argument made from people that aren't even Pitt or West Virginia people. But it is a fun rivalry, to say the least. There is no love lost between the two schools. But did not expect Larry Fitzgerald of all people to be kind of go in on the rivalry. I love this is exactly what makes rivalries great. A lot of the West Virginia people, I think, they loved it as well. I did see a couple really odd comments about it. We won't get into those, but yeah, I did not see that coming on the news docket when I saw he was going to be on PMT.
Yeah, no, and I feel like people could easily kind of go the other way with those type of comments and say it's kind of like a perpetuating stereotype perspective and kind of back into the cancel culture of some of those aspects. But it was definitely a playful response if you listen to the interview, and particularly the whole interview, in which Larry was very respectful through it all. But that's a podcast where they do try to bring out the funny throughout those interviews, and he was just waiting for that West Virginia moment to throw a couple digs there. So it's definitely alive and well, and like you said, a rivalry that I'm fun that's still happening, and they're still willing to play each other and things of that nature too. So definitely a fun aspect there.
So as we do most weeks, we'll jump into a little nostalgia here. Wanted to go through Our favorite places that we've seen a game outside of Pittsburgh. Obviously, we're going to be biased to watching our games at home in Pittsburgh, but we've both seen games, football, baseball, hockey, as we've gone through in detail on some of the hockey game that we went to, the Penguins Flyers game. But what's your a place that you would recommend seeing, and or maybe one of your favorite places that you've seen a game at outside of Pittsburgh?
Yeah, so I think for me, when it comes down to going to see a sporting event and kind of making it be memorable and favorite and kind of all those things, I think it has to be one of two sports. It's either baseball or it's college football. I think those are the two that I think have either the atmosphere of a college football or kind of the uniqueness of the stadium itself, which is baseball. So I think the college football one is the one that was the coolest for me. So I've been lucky enough to see Michigan and Ohio State play in the Shoe, and I've also seen them play in the Big House in Michigan as well. I would say I like the one in the Shoe better because they won that game over the one in the Big House in which they lost. But otherwise, those two stadiums where you're 100,000 plus, especially a game of that magnitude where everybody is packed in, the energy is so strong, that was certainly kind of bucket list on either side of that.
Nice. I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think that I forgotten until you said that you were at that game in Michigan. Was that the first Ohio State loss up there out of those 3 in a row or whatever it was? It was the first one, right? Yeah,
they were on a little bit of a run. So we had all the trash talking going into the game, and on the way out, kind of had the walk between your leg perspective.
I've heard really good things about I don't know if you saw a ton of the campus, but how was, and it was December, I guess, when you saw the game, but how was the campus in Ann Arbor?
It was nice. Definitely college town. It's based around, that team and those Saturdays. So I feel like it's a city that came alive, in that town and in that moment as well. So they definitely showed up to the moment. And honestly, I expected some heat from Michigan fans. It certainly happened. But, all in all, a pretty positive experience from someone going in enemy territory as well.
Yeah. Well, we didn't talk about this before, but ironically, the two I wanted to bring up are to fit what you just said, baseball and college football. My honorable mention would have been, I can't tell anyone to go and see a game here because the stadium no longer exists, but seeing a baseball game at Yankee Stadium was pretty cool. It was almost like a time capsule. I saw 2 games there, but it is like, I can't even imagine now. I mean, this is probably 20 years ago I saw these games, but you go up there and you really get when people say, well, you need space to make these new stadiums and, everything just keeps getting bigger. And you go to a new stadium, you see it, you're like, oh, wow, I thought the stadiums from 15, 20 years ago were big. And then there's more room, there's more space, everything's new. You go to a game at Yankee Stadium, you're like, wow, this is tight. The concourses are tight. There's pipes, exposed and everything. But you see the Memorial Park and all that. And it's just, you felt like you were at somewhere. You felt that, that you were at Yankee Stadium, that you were at a historic place, almost like a museum in a way. So it was really cool seeing a game there. And then similarly, I would say the one I wanted to mention was Notre Dame. If you're a college football game, you have to see a game at Notre Dame. Same idea, as Yankee Stadium, in that you feel it some of the statues and Touchdown Jesus and Number One Moses. There's some really cool stuff there. Going in, and I would even say that the whole experience, we went in on a Friday, and I think Linebackers was the bar we went to. It's set up. They know what they know what they're doing. They had it was almost like a Pitt meetup. So half the bar was Pitt. They played Sweet Caroline. They know what they're doing there. They know that they're a destination for a lot of these away teams. So just really cool seeing a game there. I didn't even mention the Grotto, and we followed the band and everything. So it was really cool seeing a game. Would have been way cooler if Pitt hung on and pulled off a big upset. They almost won the game we were at. It was the year Maurice French returned the second half kickoff. And that was the Watson year where the offense wasn't exactly the most exciting. The game came down to them trying to sneak a quarterback onto the field as a punter. So that's how that game went. But yeah, it was just a very cool place to see a game. Same as with Yankee Stadium, you just feel like you're at a place that, is museum aspect to it. There's history there. So really cool. If you're a college football game, you've got to go to Notre Dame to see a game. Even though I don't love Notre Dame, when Pitt's playing them, it's still just a really cool place to see a game.
No, I would have to agree. It's on my list. I haven't been there yet, but got to make it there.
Yeah.
So if anyone's still hanging around, though, we appreciate it. Make sure you like, subscribe, help push us to those 100 subscribers if you're one of the few that haven't yet. But otherwise, we'll see you guys next time.
See you later.